Making royal icing, it's always very difficult to know what consistency your royal icing should be. Now, a good recipe to use to make it is about 3 fluid ounces of albumin solution or egg white, a pound of icing sugar, but you must remember to add some glycerine, because if you, for instance, decided to cover your cake in royal icing like a snow scene and you didn't put glycerine in, what you'll find is that your glycerine stops it from going too hard. If you don't put it in, you may not be able to cut your cake. So for every pound of icing sugar, put in 1 teaspoon of glycerine. Now the way to mix your royal icing is on a machine on the slowest speed. Even though you've got the same ingredients in here as you would for a meringue, you do not want a meringue. You don't want lots of bubbles in it. So whatever the slowest speed on your machine is, that's the speed you want to do. It's ideal if you've got a machine with a dial, so you can actually have it on a very, very, very slow speed. Whereas sometimes if your machine has got 3 speeds, the first one is actually a little bit fast. And you want to beat it for a very long time on a slow speed until it achieves that kind of peakiness. It wants to be able to stand up in points by itself, but it doesn't want to be very, very stiff, so it will hurt your wrist when you're piping it. And that's the consistency you would have it if you were doing stars or you're doing shells. So let me just show you. When you fill your piping bag, you never more than half fill it. So that's as much icing that I would put into there. Now when you close your bag, you push the sides in and you roll the top down. Now the reason you do that is because if you forget to squeeze from the top downwards, which is ever so easy to do when you're concentrating, and if you start squeezing from the middle, look what's happening. Your bag's unravelling. But because you did that roll, you've got a little bit of time to notice and squash it back down before a big lump of icing plops all over your cake. So never more than half full and roll the top of the bag down. I've got a star tube in here, so I filled my bag half full. If you, for instance, had a little tube like a 1 or a 2, a little one like that, you don't want to have it as much as half full. A third full would be enough. The smaller the hole at the end of your tube, the less icing you want in your bag, or you'll just hurt your wrist as you're piping. Now the consistency of your icing should create a shape like that when you pipe out of it. Now if you put the wrong consistency into your bag, you will get a completely different shape coming out. So let me show you with this icing. Now this has gone slack. Now when you keep your royal icing as well, it goes slightly wet and the stiffness goes away from it the longer you keep it. So it's ideal to use immediately, but the longer you keep it, it's not so good. Now if you look at this, you see you've got the little star shapes when you first pipe, but then you're losing them. Now this icing here, the wet shiny looking icing, that all you had to do with that icing is leave it on the beater a bit longer. Let it carry on mixing a little bit longer. Maybe a tiny bit of icing sugar could be added as well, but it just needed to beat for longer because it always starts quite wet, and as the air's incorporated slowly, it becomes more peaky. The reason you need your royal icing to hold its shape is because traditionally royal icing was done and overpiped on. And if you haven't got a strong shape underneath, it's impossible to overpipe on. So your consistency of your royal icing should be peaky like this. You should see all the definition of the shells, but don't make it too stiff that it hurts your wrist when you pipe it. Now if you want to do pearls, and this would be a little pearl, you can actually have your icing a little bit slacker than if it was for doing shells. Can you see how the icing is a little bit shinier? And that makes a much, much better shape if you're doing a pearl. Also, if you're doing pressure piping and you want to do little shapes. So if you were, for instance, piping, I'm just doing a little teddy bear now, which basically is lots of little circles. That icing would want to be very slightly slacker as well. So as you piped it, it slightly flops down. Do a little bird as well. So. And then you've got a little bird. So that's perfect for doing icing like that.